How well will Florida State recruit the class of 26, especially the in-state recruits? Well, today we're going to preview the 2026 prospects at the Under Armour All-American Game, giving Florida State fans a glimpse of the future.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime recruiting analyst and college football writer. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Today's show is going to primarily talk about two things. At the end, we're going to discuss the mailbag, and a lot of people have been commenting on the Locked On Seminoles YouTube page about the offensive line recruiting / the transfer portal additions, and quite frankly, the overall depth chart and future of what the Noles have up front. It's some pretty interesting questions and some good comments, and I'm going to give my own takes on that. Before that, and the majority of the show, we're going to talk about the recruits in the class of 2026, some overall needs for the Noles, and I'm going to break down the underclassmen that are now participating in the Under Armour All-American Game in the Orlando area. And quite frankly, I'm really looking forward to getting down there, to checking out and seeing some of these guys. I know several of them, and I've seen them before, but these are young players. They develop, they get better, they get bigger, they get faster, they get stronger. So let's start with that right now. First off, Florida State at minimum will need to sign 20 players in the next class, and I think that's a pretty low bar. More likely, it'll push 25. I would say 23 is the easy over-under number to get to. 25 would not surprise me at all. A couple of reasons why. Number one, Florida State is like any other big school. Players come in. If they're not happy with playing time or NIL or whatever, the transfer portal is available, and obviously immediate eligibility follows with that. Secondarily, Florida State is going through a roster change, not only on their player roster, but their coaching roster. Once we get through spring ball, there'll probably be a few more additions than you might have expected, but that also is in conjunction with a few more departures as well. Remember, right now the portal is still ongoing, but there is also an additional portal window after spring ball for all of these college football programs. I believe it's a 10-day window right around the beginning of May, late April. That being stated, Florida State has to do its due diligence, and one of the ways to do it is to get eyes on players all over the place. Well, as a media member, I get to see some of these kids sometimes even more than what the college coaches do, and the Under Armour All-American Game allows me to do that. I go to the camps all the time, and the All-American Game itself is practices begin, and then they go into the game. It's first week of January every year. You get a lot of interaction with these kids. We get to interview them. We get to talk about who their favorite coaches are that are recruiting them, who they grew up rooting for, etc. So I'm going to share my screen here for those of you that are watching on YouTube. And we're also going to discuss just some of these players overall, like the ones I know, etc. But I want, for those of you, again, that are on YouTube, this will probably be a good way for you to look at it and understand. And I'll read off all these players and discuss them wholeheartedly for those listening on Apple, Spotify, etc., to make it a little bit easier for you as well. First off, there are always quite a few guys from Florida, and I broke it down in my own categories from the list that Dan sent us out. Dan's a really good guy. He's the media representative for Under Armour and does a tremendous job. The Florida players, I'm just going to list them, and then I'm going to talk about them individually. Most that I've seen already in some capacity or know something about them. Naeem Burrows is a kid from Bowles High School in Jacksonville who can fly. Florida State is one of many schools involved. He's got like a top 6, but I don't put a whole lot of stock, by the way, in these top 5, top 10s, whatever they may be. Let me be very clear. Florida State must start getting a lot more players from the quote-unquote panhandle / South Georgia, South Alabama area that are the creme de la creme players. If they're going to get back to being a dominant program, that is the easiest path. Bowden did it. Jimbo did it. And those are the two most successful coaches in Florida State history. I don't think there's a reason that anybody should doubt their paths. They got the kids from South Georgia they needed. They'd get a kid, they'd beat Florida or Miami or Notre Dame or Michigan or whoever for a kid from Jacksonville or a kid from Tallahassee, a kid from Pensacola. You must get those kinds of players. Secondarily, if you're going to get some of those, it's not going to hurt you with getting other players from the state of Florida too. Also from Bowles High School is a kid named Simeon Caldwell. I don't know Burroughs, but I know Caldwell pretty well. His dad's coached for the Raiders, etc. Very successful football family. Simeon is a great guy. Played safety until recently, but because of his dad's background and people thinking that he's going to grow into a linebacker, he's give or take 190, 200 right now, 6'2", 190 pounds. By the way, Burrow is 6 foot 175. Caldwell is a kid that could go anywhere. Ohio State, Notre Dame, Florida State, you name it. He's got an offer from just about all the major programs. Now that the Noles have changed their defensive staff, out of all these kids, you could make an argument that Caldwell is the most curious in terms of where he ends up, because Florida State's going to come after him hard, I'm quite sure, along with a lot of other schools. How well does a guy that, has a background with the NFL because of his father view the Florida State defensive staff? Again, new coordinator, you got a new safeties coach, the linebacker coach situation, like there's a lot of new pieces. So I'm really interested. Caldwell's a top 100 recruit by some people's opinion. We'll see how that goes. Jordan Campbell, that's a kid, Miami, Carroll City. I can't remember if he's committed to Miami or not, but he's a kid that's really good and getting kids away from Miami and down in that area, whether he's committed or not. And I don't know him personally. That would be a coup for the Noles. But this is historically a program in an area where Miami and Florida State have battled, and the endings could go any which direction. Jordan Campbell's 210. He's listed at 6'2". Carroll City, again, always had players as a school Florida State stops by every single spring. And that's a communication deal where if you're going to be big time at Florida State, when Bowden truly got over the top, not only did he get some of those South Georgia kids, some Atlanta kids, Jacksonville, Tallahassee, he would dip into South Florida and get one or two kids the Canes really wanted. Jordan Campbell is definitely that kind of guy. He is at Carroll City. I know that Miami is going to do everything they can to keep guys away from Florida State anyway, but I've got my eye on him because the Noles, as we all know, they need linebackers. Getting a South Florida kid would kill two birds with one stone, because you'd beat Miami out and you'd also fill a need for your own roster. Next player might be the best player in the state of Florida. That's Derek Cooper. He can play a linebacker or running back, depending on what you want to call it. As far as his best position, Cooper's a freak. 200 pounds, maybe just over, plays at Chaminade, Madonna. He's from the greater Fort Lauderdale area. Athletic as all get out. And he kind of favors running back, but he's okay with linebacker. Just kind of depends on what you want to talk about. At one point, he was committed to Georgia. He's backed off of that. Miami and Georgia have long since been talked about as the top programs for him. That doesn't mean a lot to me, especially, again, you got a new coordinator. Florida State, they're going to run the ball a lot. Could they make a run at Cooper? He's possibly a 5-star recruit. Absolutely. Wouldn't be shocked at all. Staying in South Florida at Northwestern High School, who just won their state championship, Jabari Flowers, corner, 6 foot 175. I do not know much about him, but Northwestern's a school that Miami and Florida State have had a lot of success with over the years. I'm sure that Florida State will be involved there. Zach Fort, Zachariah, for his long name, out of Bellflower, California, but plays at IMG in Bradenton. That's a kid I know really well. Florida State is one of the schools that's been in on him forever, but now there's a coaching change. Kind of like with Simeon Caldwell, I'm curious. Fort can play either of the safety spots, maybe play nickel. Really, really curious to hear what he has to say about his recent communication with the Noles. He's a great guy, has a tremendous personality. Will Griffin is committed to UF. I assume that's going to stay the way it is. He's from Jesuit in Tampa. Great prospect. The Gators are pretty fortunate to have him. Pepe, the offensive tackle out of IMG Academy as well, also from California. This is a kid that every school in the country has offered. The only thing I'm going to say about him, because physically, length, personality, all of it fits what Florida State wants, and along with Alabama and Southern Cal and Tech, you name it. Can Florida State get him on campus? That is my curiosity point. He's 6'8", give or take, 300 pounds, very light on his feet. He's a kid that has the right kind of personality to be in your locker room. Florida State needs more of those guys. And as far as Florida players to wrap up, the kids that I have listed here from the class of 26 that are going to be in the Under Armour All-American game, it's a player that actually committed to the Noles originally, has backed off, and there's been different takes on where he's going to end up. Isaiah Williams out of Tavares High School. It's a little bit north of Orlando. He's a little bit over 200 pounds, 6'1", athletic, plays mostly a pass rusher role at the high school level. I don't expect that's going to change necessarily all that much, but Isaiah is good enough to play inside linebacker, outside linebacker, and get after it. But at the college level, I imagine he'll probably play multiple roles. He can change directions extremely well. So seeing him in coverage would be interesting as well. And that's probably where he'll end up double dipping a little bit once he gets into the Power Four. When we come back, we're going to talk about the rest of the players in this list. And then we're also going to talk about the mailbag. We're going to have a little bit of fun with that. There's some pretty good questions coming up here on Locked On Seminoles. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can finish strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel has so many different ways for you to pick up a W. You can use it on player props, team over-under totals, the over-under on basic who's going to win the game. Lots of ways to have fun and enjoy your winnings at FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com and to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, I'm going to present my screen once again. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of these guys that Florida State needs to get in on. And we're going to talk a few players nationally, and then a few more comments about getting into the class of 26 overall. I think this is an important time right now for the Noles. It's either you get ahead or you get behind. And a few basic comments about each state some of these kids come from. Blaine Bradford, Baton Rouge Catholic. What school in the state of Louisiana is FSU most famous for recruiting? That would be Catholic. Travis Minor and a certain guy that was pretty good that played on that 93 team. Who was that? Oh, yeah, Work Done. Both of them are from Baton Rouge Catholic and were very, very good players from the Noles, both made it the NFL, etc. Blaine Bradford, I don't know if Florida State has a chance, but again, your staff has changed over. You got history at the school. Great kid, excellent academics, all of that. Blaine's a good dude. I'm curious to see if they can get him on campus. Jackson Cantwell's an offensive tackle from Missouri. I highly doubt they have a chance at him, but he's one heck of a player. Florida State used to get a kid like that every year, just kind of from a random state in the 90s, early 2000s, and somewhat true again once Jimbo came into play at Florida State. Who's it going to be this year? I'm not saying it's going to be Cantwell. I highly doubt that. But they need to be able to start getting kids. Maybe it's a New Jersey guy. Maybe it's a kid from Oklahoma. Maybe it's somebody from Ohio. They need to at least pick off one kid from a random state that is a big-name player each and every year. Dysere Carter. This is a kid out of Woodbury Forest in Virginia. He could really run. Ironically, he's committed to Rutgers right now. I'm surprised by that, but maybe he's got a connection to the school. I don't know much about him. That's another school in another area where FSU has had history. Virginia sent some players to the Noles over time. I'd be curious to see if they can get any of those guys from the Tidewater area in particular down to Tallahassee. Anthony Davis Jr. out of Grayson High School. That's a program Florida State has recruited forever. Guarantee you that the Noles will be trying to recruit him and numerous other players. Big time program and a very, very talented player. SEC offers, Florida State, you name it. You can go pretty much wherever he wants. We got the kid like James Dunnigan. This is another guy, random. He's from Manhattan High School, but not Manhattan, New York. The one in Kansas, the same place where Kansas State's at. For him to go to the Under Armour All-American game, good for James. That's really cool, man. Jair Edwards out of St. Francis. That's another school that Florida State and every other program in the country is probably going to stop by this spring. They've got 5 to 10 kids a year that are top-notch. Handful of others are going to go to the schools like Coastal Carolina, the MAC, Sunbelt, whatever. But they've got a lot of dudes. He's one of them. I'm really curious to see what happens with him. Florida State needs some help in the secondary in this class. Safety being definitely a priority. Don't be surprised if Florida State goes after Edwards. Zion Ali, I think I'm pronouncing that properly. He's committed to Maryland. He's a top 10 prospect by some of the different services. He's out of St. Francis as well. Florida State needs an elite pass rusher in this class. Period. I don't know if it's going to be Zion, but they need an elite pass rusher. Period. From the prep ranks. Let's see if the new staff and pot roast can get somebody like elite. That would be really, really important. KJ Ford out of Duncanville, arguably the best prep program in the country from the public school ranks, greater Dallas area. KJ Ford's about 250. That's a kid that if you can get him, it's going to bolster your D-line pretty quick. Also, from an area that Florida State absolutely needs to get back into even more, again, Deuce Geralds. He plays at Collins Hill just outside of Atlanta. Know the kid, really good pass rusher. He's been active on the 5-on-5 circuit, playing for different teams. And to be honest with you, Florida State or any other school would be very fortunate to get him. He's 270, 6'2", 6'3", somewhere in that range. Really twitchy for his size, and he is a brute. Really, really well put together young athlete. Quentin Gibson, he's one of those kids that can fly. He's committed actually to Colorado. Dion getting some stuff done. He's at North Crowley, one of the better programs in the Dallas area. I'm not sure how that's going to work out with him staying at Colorado, but it looks like Dion's going to be there a while. Good for him. If they start getting some of those kids from the Dallas area, it would help them. But this is another kind of kid that Florida State used to get. Florida State with slot receivers, there aren't many programs in the last 30 years that have been better than the Seminoles. Brock Harris, tight end out of the state of Utah. I actually saw him at an Under Armour event this past spring, and we were like, who is this? Everybody's like, this kid's really, really good. And then the offers just started flocking in from coast to coast. I'm not saying he's Brock Bowers because he doesn't have that kind of speed, but the hand-eye coordination and the route running and the competitiveness. I mean, he went to Florida for an Under Armour camp, and he's from Utah. He put in the time and effort there, along with his family and coaches. Really good prospect. Florida State's starting to get some tight ends, too. Nothing would shock me if he came down for a visit. Psyche Helton, offensive lineman from Carrollton, Georgia. Another program in Georgia, not that far from Atlanta. Florida State always recruits there. They're always going to recruit there. Carrollton is where Juju Lewis is from. Florida State just got a DB from there. Don't be surprised if the Noles try to get him. They're going to take, in my opinion, in the class of 26, at least 4, if not 5 guys from the offensive line because they need to get back to a balanced roster. Xavier Hyder, the kid that's from Louisiana or from Virginia, is committed to Penn State. Florida State, everybody's still going to recruit him. Langston Hogg from Cartersville. It's another famous program in Georgia. I wouldn't be surprised if the Noles went after him. Could be a possible center candidate. Maybe the guy I'm most, I don't even know how to pronounce his last name, honestly, but that I'm most appealed to is Emmanuel Ianhacho. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but he's from Georgetown Prep and DC, but he lives in Baltimore. He's 350, and he's been about that size since his sophomore year. He might be the top player in the country for this class. Just depends on where it kind of finishes, but he's top 10 conservatively. Insane athleticism for his size. Very few guys can go into a major program like Florida State and start as a freshman. Emmanuel is one of them. Holy cow, is that kid good. Tristan Keys, wide receiver out of Hattiesburg in Mississippi. He might be the best receiver in the country in this class. He's certainly up there. Florida State's usually going to get 1 or 2 kids out of Mississippi. They've gotten some really good ones recently. They're going to have a starting corner from Mississippi this next year. I think this is the kind of guy that Bowden would have made a strong run at. I guarantee you, 6'1", 160, and he can fly. That is also Xavier McDonald, another Mississippi kid. Might as well go ahead and mention him. J. Raylan McCoy, yet another Mississippi kid, 6'7", 250 out of Tupelo. I know him pretty well. He plays with the California Power 5-on-5 team. I'm not sure where he stands, but he's got offers from like Oregon to Miami across the country. Really long, strong side defensive end. Got a big personality. He's going to make a college defensive line coach very, very happy. Javion Osborne, running back out of the greater Dallas area. He plays at Forney High School. That's a player that I've heard Michigan mentioned with quite a bit. Florida State and everybody else going to offer. We'll see. Caden Prothrow, maybe the kid on this list I know better than anybody else out of Bowden High School, just outside of Carrollton, Georgia. Florida State is one of the schools that he likes a lot. I put up a picture recently on the YouTube page for the thumbnail with him throwing up the gloves. It's the Florida State gloves. Caden 6'6", 210, one of the best combo receiver tight end guys. The Noles had him on campus for the North Carolina game, possibly a 5-star recruit, depending on which service you go with. Elite player, great young man. Florida State would do well to get him. Xavier Tiller, another kid very similar in size and style, 6'5", 220 out of Langston Hughes on the south edge of Atlanta. He's committed to A&M. I'm curious if that one's going to hold. I would bet otherwise. Carnell Warren out of Bluffton, South Carolina. Big receiver, 6'4". Florida State and every other school in the country is going to go after some of these bigger receivers. There aren't as many of them, in my opinion, as there used to be. And as we all know, the Noles, led by Mike Norvell, like big receivers. Prince Williams, defensive lineman out of Bishop Gorman. There isn't a school in the country that doesn't recruit Bishop Gorman. I'm sure the Noles will be one of them as well. Nolan Wilson, defensive lineman at Picayune, Mississippi. That's probably the best program in southern Mississippi right now, constantly having guys. And Florida State needs D lineman. He's 6'4", 250. That's a really good player. And I haven't seen him live, but I talked to somebody this morning for this show. He's another one of those guys that everybody's kind of high on, so we'll see how that goes. When we come back, we're going to do the mailbag, talk a little bit about where Florida State's at with the offensive line. A lot of these questions are about that. And if you have something you want to talk about, comment on the YouTube page, or you could hit me up on X at FBScout_Florida. That's on X at FBScout_Florida. I've got an open inbox. If you want me to bring up a topic, I'm more than happy to do it. There's a lot of discussion points with the portal open, recruiting getting started for the next class, right here on Locked On Seminoles. We will be back in 1 second. Have you downloaded the Gametime app yet? It's your opportunity, especially during the holidays when you're getting together with friends and family, to go to events and experience something live. Go to the theater, go to a concert, go to a basketball game like the Heat, maybe the Magic, maybe the Hawks, whatever it is. Go to see a hockey game, Tampa Bay Lightning, whoever you want to go see. Gametime has that opportunity for you. They also have Gametime picks inside the app, where if you click on it, it'll show you the best ticket prices at an event. It's really, really cool. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. All right. This is the fun part. Talking about some of these different questions and comments that come up on the YouTube page. I wrote down a few of these because I thought they were intriguing. I'm not going to do every one I get because I get tons and tons of comments. Sometimes there's 100 or more, but here are a few of the better ones that I've had here recently, and I just thought I would throw these out and let everybody comment on them as they see fit. All right. Renee Lamone, 5876, curious how Jordan Scott lines up opposite of Deuce Robinson. That's a really good question. My thought process on that is very simple. You use them how they are needed to be used game to game. Matchups first. I mean, they've got really bad corners and or smaller corners. You might see more combination. Deuce is 6'5", 6'6". And allegedly, Scott is about the same, 6'6"-ish, maybe 6'7", depending on who you want to believe. That's not much fun for DBs. Maybe they use them in H-back situations too, with short yardage, play action. There's a lot of ways you can go that route. As far as playing them together and just first down and 10 in your own end, I don't think you'll see that as much, but it's not out of the question because the following also applies. If for whatever reason, Jordan Scott comes out of the junior college ranks in Mississippi and comes to Tallahassee and tears it up in the spring and or in the summer, they're going to find more ways to get him on the field. So really, it's just about how his performance works. We all know Norvell prefers big receivers. Johnny Wilson, obviously the easy one to point to, but they can throw it up more. That's cool. If you earn it, you play. I will guarantee you Deuce is going to be on the field because he's a guy that's a gamer. He still has to learn the offense too. He still has to adjust. We'll see how that goes. But Florida State is in a scenario where they have options. So at worst, that is a really good scenario to be in because you have big body guys that have some proven production at the college level. I like that. So good question by Renee Lamone. Gaming Hall XR7MW. I had asked how many receivers would Florida State get out of the portal after the Deuce Robinson commitment. I said, is it going to be one? Is it going to be two? Is it going to be three? He answered, it depends on how many of the current freshman receivers at Florida State. Remember, they got 4. How many of them end up transferring? And I hadn't really thought about it much, but I mean, out of every group, just about that comes in within 2 years, at least one guy out of each position group leaves. Maybe somebody leaves after this spring. So you got Elijah Moore and BJ Gibson from out of state, one's from Maryland area, and one's from Georgia. You got Fryer and McCoy out of Florida. Maybe one leaves. Maybe one doesn't. So he brings up a really good point. I don't know. I mean, if I had to guess, 2 more, they need somebody that's twitchy on the outside. Everybody does. And I think they'd still need depth and some insurance. So if they took 2 more in addition to Deuce, it wouldn't be surprising. If they get a dude, and I truly mean a dude, perhaps they only take 2. I don't know, because that way you could save the scholarship for something else, D-line, safety, whatever it may be. Tall Florida guy. As for Pettis, he says he looks like a guard playing tackle to me. It's a good point, and it's something I'd actually brought up on this show recently when we were discussing Pettis before he committed and then after he committed, both shows. He's a power player. He's 350. Could he play guard? Certainly. But it, again, kind of like I was commenting on that first question, talking about how do you play Scott with Robinson, your offensive scheme, who you're playing against, etc. Would it shock me if Micah Pettis played some guard at Florida State before he left? No. The projection now, for what we understand in the media, is that he'll play tackle. You got to still go out and earn it. Now, that doesn't mean that Pettis will play tackle at the National Football League level. He's still got a lot to prove, and he's not good enough, in my opinion, to play in the NFL at tackle because the pass protection is iffy. But if he's going to continue on this path and get better as a run blocker, it'll at least get him into an NFL training camp. He's got now, because of the situation of him redshirting, he's got 2 years possibly to play at Florida State. He could be an NFL guy at tackle, but we'll see how he winds up long term. It's not easy to project these things. But again, remember, what scheme are you playing at? It's Gus Malzahn's. He likes to run the ball downhill, and he needs power blockers. Pettis certainly fits that. Cochino 823. I had talked about yesterday, a bunch of the young linemen had to be developed. You can't just rely on the portal. Although, and I get it, this group that they're bringing in, and they're going to add more, they're probably going to need 5 or more. After this group of linemen, when we get to this point next year, you can't take this many transfer. You got to have some guys through the pipeline of the high school ranks and junior college that you can bring in. Just my opinion. And Cochino 823 says, Estes, Simmons, Otto, Early, and Rizzi, it is important that Coach Hand develops these young men. Atkins could not do it, and he's right. Hand's got to do a much better job, because the development of Florida State from the high school ranks was bad. It was really bad. That might be the most straightforward comment, and just, yeah, there's no doubt about it, that I've had on the show in quite a while. Like, the development of offensive linemen from the high school ranks, you got to get talented. I get it. But you still have to do better than what you did, because think about it. Take out the prep ranks for a second. Mo was a 6th-year senior and regressed. I'm sorry, that's not acceptable. Darius, same thing at left tackle. I know he was beat up some, but he wasn't as good this season as he was in 23. Why? Same coach. That's a little concerning. This might be one of the best names on the YouTube page that I've seen for Locked On Seminoles. I just want to nap, says, Otto probably develops into a starter. Very young player. Most offensive linemen don't develop until year 3, and that is very true. And he also noted that Lucas Simmons has the highest potential out of some of the young guys. So at this point is similar to Cochino 823's. Got to develop these guys. 100%. If Florida State does not, Florida State will not win consistently. You are not going to go out, as the 24 season proved, and consistently just win with the portal at any one given position. Quarterback, kicker, linebacker, offensive. You're going to have misses. There's going to be issues in the locker room. They need to be the final piece to the wall, not the building blocks. So while this year is the exception, moving forward, the Noles need to hit and do better out of the recruiting ranks of high school, a little bit of JUCO, especially with the new JUCO rule. We'll talk more about that coming up in the next week or two, but they got to develop guys no matter what. They're going to be here multiple years. That is something for Herb Hand to do, and I fully expect him to do that. Final thing, Prince Bowie 9950. Brian, how many more portal offensive linemen will they get? Will they get a center? And what about Chasten Brown, the offensive lineman out of Georgia? So it's got 3 things here. I think 2 more portal guys is minimum. That's minimum. Does that mean that Florida State couldn't take 3? Sure. Does that mean they will get 2 more? They may miss. Who knows? But I think it would be best if they could get 2 more. Let me add to that. At least 1 more of those 2 need to be multi-year guys, meaning they're only going to be in their junior year of eligibility after this season. That would be great. Further, on this question, he talked about getting a center. I agree. That's a need. Maybe they move somebody. I don't know which player that's currently on the roster. That's a great question for spring, and I am not going to touch it. That's something Herb Hand has to figure out. He's a good coach. And maybe they get somebody after spring ball, too. There's a million different ways to hit that. But getting a center is certainly a priority point. And finally, Chasten Brown, he's kind of a late bloomer in the state of Georgia. I haven't heard anything recently, but it's a kid Florida State offered right around signing day, if I remember correctly. That's something I'll talk about once something more happens, but I have not heard anything yet. Coming up on Friday, going to talk more about 2026 recruits. Florida State, again, like I was talking about on today's show, they really have to get after guys in-state, South Georgia, etc. Going to talk about the defensive line recruits in the area, and we're going to talk about some other recruits as well, right here on Locked On Seminoles. Please hit that like button, that notification bell, and subscribe if you have not already. And again, if you can get out there and check out other stuff on this site, well, one way to find out what's going on is to go to my X handle at FBScout_Florida. That's at FBScout_Florida. I will see everybody again on Friday.